He cheated on me with my best friend, and they thought I would never find out. They thought I would cry, beg him to stay, and blame myself. They were wrong. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Corinne Halstead. For 6 years, I believed I was building a future with Gideon Mercer. We were engaged, living in a quiet neighborhood in Asheville. Our house had a wide front porch and tall maple trees that turned bright orange in the fall. I picked the paint color for the kitchen. I planted the flowers along the walkway. I truly believed this was the place where I would grow old with him. Gideon ran a contracting business. When we first started dating, it was just an idea and an old pickup truck. I believed in him before anyone else did. I used part of my inheritance from my grandmother to help him get started. I told myself it was an investment in our future. I handled paperwork, organized invoices, and helped him meet with clients. He liked to say he built everything from nothing. I smiled and let him say it. My best friend was Elena Crowder. I met her during my sophomore year of college. She was bold and funny, always the loudest person in the room. She stood next to me as my maid of honor during our engagement party. She helped me choose my wedding dress. She cried when Gideon proposed and told me I had found a good man. Looking back, maybe the signs were always there. But when you love people, you don't look for cracks. You paint over them. Things started to shift slowly. Gideon began working later than usual. At first, I admired his dedication. He said a new commercial renovation project needed extra attention. I would stay up waiting for him, sometimes falling asleep on the couch with the television still on. When he finally came home, he smelled like sawdust and something else I couldn't place. Not perfume exactly, just different. Elena also became distant. Our weekly Friday dinners turned into once-a-month lunches. She always had an excuse. A family issue. A last-minute plan. A headache. I told myself adulthood was just busy. People grow apart sometimes, even when they don't mean to. One Saturday evening, I was cleaning out Gideon's truck because we planned to drive to my parents' house the next morning. I reached under the passenger seat and found a crumpled receipt. It was from a small lakeside boutique hotel about 2 hours away. 2 guests. 1 room. The date was from the previous weekend. That weekend, Gideon had told me he needed to supervise an out-of-town job site. Elena had texted me saying she was visiting her aunt in Raleigh. My hands started to shake so badly I had to sit down in the driveway. I stared at the receipt like it would suddenly explain itself. Maybe it was a client meeting. Maybe he shared a room with a coworker. Maybe there was some simple reason. I wanted to believe anything except the truth forming quietly in my mind. When Gideon came home that night, I acted normal. I handed him a glass of water. I asked how his day was. He kissed my forehead and thanked me for always supporting him. His eyes didn't flicker. His voice didn't shake. If he was lying, he was good at it. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I started watching. I paid attention to how often his phone buzzed and how quickly he flipped it face down. I noticed the way Elena avoided looking directly at me when the 3 of us met for coffee the following week. They were careful, but not careful enough. There was a tension between them that hadn't been there before. A shared secret hanging in the air. One night, lying in bed beside Gideon, I realized something painful. I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of being made a fool. I closed my eyes and decided I needed proof. Not suspicions. Not guesses. Proof. That was the moment everything changed inside me. About a month after I found that receipt, I got the proof I didn't know I was strong enough to handle. One afternoon, my printer stopped working while I was organizing some paperwork at home. Gideon had left his tablet on the kitchen counter, and I knew it was synced to the office printer. I picked it up without thinking. I had used it before. There was no password. As soon as I unlocked the screen, a message notification appeared at the top. Elena. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I froze. For a second, I told myself not to look. If I didn't open it, I could still pretend everything was fine. But I opened it. Last weekend was worth every risk. That was the message. It felt like someone poured ice water down my back. My hands went cold. I tapped the conversation, and the screen filled with weeks of messages. Hotel confirmations. Private jokes. Photos of sunsets from that same lakeside hotel. One message from Gideon said, "She has no idea. After the wedding, we'll figure it out." After the wedding. They were planning to let me marry him first. There were more messages. Elena complaining about how hard it was to act normal around me. Gideon reassuring her that I trusted them both completely. They even joked about how loyal I was, like that was something stupid. I sat down at the kitchen table and read everything. Every word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. It felt like my body had gone numb, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was the betrayal layered inside betrayal. My fiancé and my best friend. The two people I defended the most. The two people I trusted without question. When Gideon came home that evening, I had already memorized the messages. I knew the dates. I knew the lies. I looked at him differently now. Not with love. Not even with anger. With distance. He kissed me hello like always. I noticed how easily he did it. How natural his smile looked. I wondered how long he had been lying to my face. That night, he fell asleep quickly. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. I replayed the messages in my head. After the wedding. That line kept echoing. They weren't confused. They weren't guilty. They were strategic. That's when something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing myself as the victim. I started seeing the bigger picture. I thought about the house. It was in my name because I had better credit when we bought it. I thought about the money I had invested into his business at the beginning. The contracts we signed. The records I kept organized in the filing cabinet downstairs. I also remembered something else from the messages. A conversation about money. Gideon had transferred a large amount from our joint savings into another account. Elena told him it was smart to protect himself. Protect himself from me. They were planning for a future where I was gone. I didn't confront either of them the next day. I texted Elena like nothing was wrong. She responded with heart emojis. I watched her words carefully now, searching for cracks. She asked about final wedding details and whether I wanted her to come over that weekend. I told her yes. If they thought I was clueless, I would let them keep thinking that. Instead of breaking down, I made a quiet decision. I would not explode and give them the satisfaction of drama. I would not beg for explanations. I would not let them twist the story and paint me as unstable or jealous. I would move carefully. The next morning, while Gideon was at work, I gathered copies of financial documents from his office files at home. I printed bank statements. I saved screenshots of the messages from the tablet and sent them to a secure email account he didn't know about. Every piece of evidence felt like armor. My heartbreak was still there. It hit me in waves when I least expected it. While folding laundry. While washing dishes. While looking at the engagement photo hanging in the hallway. But alongside the pain was something steadier. Focus. They thought I would be the last to know. They were wrong. The next few days felt unreal, like I was living inside a quiet storm. On the outside, nothing had changed. Gideon still left early for work. He still kissed me goodbye. Elena still texted me about wedding flowers and seating charts. Inside, everything was different. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer named Brennan Klein. His office was in a brick building downtown, simple and quiet. When I sat across from him, I felt my voice shake for the first time since finding the messages. I told him everything. The cheating. The financial transfers. The business I helped fund. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. Do you want revenge, or do you want protection? The question surprised me. I thought about it for a moment. Protection, I said. But deep down, I knew protection could feel a lot like revenge. Brennan asked for documents. I gave him copies of the original business agreement Gideon and I had signed years ago. At the time, we were just trying to keep things clear between us. The startup capital had come from my inheritance. It was written clearly that my contribution gave me a majority financial interest until it was repaid in full. It had never been repaid. We also reviewed the house deed. My name only. Gideon had insisted it didn't matter because we were getting married anyway. I remembered feeling proud of us for being mature about money. Now I felt grateful. Brennan noticed the recent transfer from our joint savings into another account. That's important, he said. Especially if it was done without your consent. I didn't realize how much I needed someone calm and logical in that moment. My emotions were loud, but Brennan focused on facts. Paperwork. Timelines. Signatures. He advised me not to confront Gideon yet. Let's secure your position first, he said. So I went home and continued acting like nothing was wrong. I cooked Gideon's favorite pasta that week. I sat beside him on the couch. I even asked about the supposed commercial project he was managing. He told the story smoothly, adding small details to make it believable. I nodded and smiled, wondering how many lies he had practiced in his head before speaking them out loud. Elena came over one evening to help with wedding invitations. She hugged me tightly when she arrived. I could feel her heartbeat against mine. I wondered if she felt any guilt at all. While we sorted envelopes, she casually mentioned that relationships were complicated and sometimes people made mistakes. The comment felt intentional, like she was testing something. I kept my face neutral and said, "Trust is everything to me." For a second, she looked uncomfortable. That small reaction told me more than any message. Over the next 2 weeks, Brennan moved forward. He drafted legal notices regarding my financial interest in the company. He prepared documentation to freeze certain joint accounts until ownership disputes were clarified. Everything was done by the book. Quiet. Clean. Meanwhile, I kept gathering proof. I found more financial inconsistencies in the company records. Payments redirected. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Gideon wasn't just cheating. He was positioning himself financially, probably thinking once we were married, everything would blend together legally. He underestimated me. One night, while Gideon showered, his phone buzzed on the dresser. I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was. But I glanced anyway. "Elena, are you sure she won't find out before everything's settled?" Everything's settled. That line made my chest tighten, but it also confirmed something important. They were planning an exit strategy. They thought they were steps ahead. They had no idea I was already 10 steps further. The final paperwork was ready by the end of the 3rd week. Brennan told me we would send formal notice regarding the business ownership dispute first. It would require Gideon to provide full financial transparency immediately. The timing had to be precise. That Friday evening, I set the table like usual. Gideon came home looking tired but relaxed. We sat down to eat. I made small talk. He talked about future expansion plans for the company. Right in the middle of dinner, his phone rang. He looked confused when he saw the number. He answered. I watched his face change slowly. Confusion turned to shock. Shock turned to pale silence. He hung up and stared at me. "Did you know about this?" he asked quietly. I took a sip of water before answering. Yes. And for the first time since this started, I saw fear in his eyes. Gideon's hands were still shaking when he put his phone down. The color had drained from his face. He tried to speak, but no words came out at first. "What is this about ownership disputes?" he finally asked. His voice didn't sound confident anymore. It sounded small. I folded my napkin carefully and placed it beside my plate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply looked at him. "It's about the money I invested," I said calmly. "And the contracts you signed." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman sitting across from him. "You talked to a lawyer?" he asked. "Yes." There was a long silence between us. I could almost see his mind racing, trying to calculate what I knew and how much damage had already been done. "You're overreacting," he said finally. "This is unnecessary." I held his gaze. "Is it?" That's when I decided to say it. "I know about you and Elena." His body went completely still. He didn't even blink. For a moment, I thought he might try to deny it. But instead, he leaned back in his chair and ran a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think," he said. I almost laughed. That sentence sounded so predictable. So weak. "Then tell me what it is," I replied. He started with excuses. He said he felt distant from me. He said the pressure of the wedding made him confused. He said it just happened. Every word felt rehearsed. When I mentioned the hotel, his mouth tightened. When I mentioned the messages about marrying me first and figuring it out later, he looked away. "You went through my tablet?" he asked, as if that was the betrayal. "You went through my life," I answered quietly. That hit him harder than any yelling would have. He tried to shift blame. He said Elena had pursued him. He said he felt trapped. He said he didn't know how to tell me because he didn't want to hurt me. But he was already hurting me. While he spoke, I realized something important. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. The sadness was there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. The anger had cooled into something sharper and more stable. Control. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Elena. I let it ring once before answering. Her voice was frantic. "What did you do?" she demanded. I put the phone on speaker without telling her. "I protected myself," I said. "You're ruining everything," she snapped. "You didn't have to involve lawyers." Gideon's eyes widened. He hadn't expected her to call so quickly. He also hadn't expected me to let him hear her panic. Ruining everything? I repeated calmly. You mean your plan? There was silence on the other end. You weren't supposed to find out yet, she said, her voice softer now. Not supposed to find out yet. The honesty of that sentence stunned even Gideon. He looked at the phone like it had betrayed him too. I ended the call without another word. The room felt heavy, but I didn't feel crushed. I felt clear. You blindsided me, Gideon said quietly, almost accusingly. I looked at him carefully. You planned to marry me while cheating on me and moving money behind my back. You don't get to talk about being blindsided. He didn't argue after that. That night, he slept in the guest room. I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling again. But this time, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel powerless. The next morning, Brennan filed the official financial claim against the company. The joint accounts were temporarily frozen pending review. Gideon received formal notice requiring him to provide full business records within days. Reality had arrived. Elena showed up at the house 2 days later without warning. She looked different, tired, pale, nervous. She asked to talk. I stepped outside onto the porch instead of letting her in. You're making a mistake, she said. We were going to tell you eventually. After the wedding? I asked. She didn't answer. We didn't mean for it to go this far, she added. But it did, I replied. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have anything clever to say. No jokes. No confidence. Just fear. That's when I realized something powerful. They had counted on my emotions. They thought I would break down. They thought guilt and confusion would protect them. Instead, I chose structure. I chose evidence. I chose patience. And now they were the ones scrambling. After that confrontation, everything moved quickly. Gideon tried to act normal for a few days, but the pressure was obvious. He spent hours on phone calls with his accountant. He avoided eye contact with me. The confident man who once talked about expanding his business into 3 states now looked like he was trying to survive 1 week at a time. Brennan requested full financial transparency. When the documents came in, the truth was even worse than I expected. Gideon had been slowly transferring company funds into a separate account for months. Not huge amounts at first, just small transfers that wouldn't raise suspicion. Then larger ones. The account wasn't in his name alone. It was shared with Elena. Seeing her name next to his on official bank documents hurt more than any text message. It wasn't just passion or confusion. It was planning. Brennan explained that because my original investment had not been repaid, and because I had documentation of my financial stake, I legally held majority interest in the company. Gideon had treated it like his alone, but the contracts said otherwise. He underestimated paperwork. When Gideon realized how serious this was, he tried to negotiate. One evening, he sat across from me at the dining table, the same place where he once talked about our honeymoon plans. We can settle this privately, he said. No need to drag it through court. I looked at him calmly. You dragged it there the moment you decided to lie. He ran his hands through his hair again, frustrated. You're destroying everything we built. I asked softly. He didn't respond. Elena moved into his small rental apartment after he temporarily left the house. I heard about it through one of our mutual acquaintances. Apparently, the transition wasn't smooth. Money was tight now. Accounts were frozen. Legal fees were adding up. Stress does something interesting to people. It exposes cracks that romance once covered. A few weeks later, I ran into Elena at a grocery store. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she avoided the frozen food aisle where we used to laugh about trying new desserts. She approached me cautiously. This has gotten out of control, she said quietly. No, I replied. It finally got clear. She tried to explain that Gideon had promised her security, that he said I would understand eventually. Hearing that almost made me smile. Understand what? That my best friend and fiancé built a backup plan behind my back? I didn't argue with her. I didn't insult her. I just walked away. Meanwhile, the legal process continued. Because of documented financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary responsibility, I had strong standing. Brennan remained calm and precise through every step. Eventually, the official ruling came. Majority control of the company transferred to me pending final settlement. Gideon was allowed to remain temporarily for operational transition, but without authority over major decisions. When he received the notice, he called me immediately. You don't even want the company, he said angrily. You don't care about construction. You're right, I answered. I care about fairness. There was silence on the other end. The house was another matter. Since it was solely in my name, there was no legal argument. Gideon removed the rest of his belongings one afternoon while I was out. When I returned, the closet felt emptier, but the air felt lighter. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Through mutual contacts, I later heard that Gideon and Elena were arguing constantly. Without easy money and secret excitement, their relationship looked different. Real life replaced stolen weekends and hidden messages. It turns out betrayal feels thrilling only when someone else is carrying the stability. Now they had to carry each other. And it was heavy. The final settlement came 3 months later. By then, I was no longer waking up with that heavy feeling in my chest. The sadness had softened. It was still there sometimes, but it didn't control my day. What replaced it was clarity. Brennan called me into his office to review the final documents. Because of the original investment agreement and the financial misconduct Gideon committed by moving funds without authorization, I had full legal right to claim ownership. He could either buy out my share at market value, which he couldn't afford, or transfer operational control completely. He chose the second option. When the paperwork was signed, it felt strangely quiet. No dramatic courtroom scene. No shouting. Just signatures and stamps. I owned the company. For a moment, I considered keeping it. I thought about stepping into the role fully, learning everything, rebuilding it under my name. But when I imagined spending years attached to something that reminded me of betrayal, I realized I didn't want it. So I made a decision. I sold it. There was a regional competitor that had shown interest before. With majority ownership, I was able to negotiate directly. The sale was clean and legal. The funds were transferred to my account within weeks. Gideon found out the same day the acquisition became public in local business records. He called me again. "You sold it." His voice sounded shocked, almost desperate. "Yes," I answered calmly. "You didn't even talk to me." "You didn't talk to me either," I replied. There was nothing more to say. Without the company, without the house, without access to the savings he tried to move, Gideon was left starting over from scratch. I didn't feel joy about that. I just felt balance restored. Elena tried to reach out once more after everything was finalized. She sent a short message asking if we could find closure. I stared at it for a long time. Closure. The word felt almost ironic. I didn't respond. Some doors close quietly. You don't reopen them just to prove you can. A few months later, I packed my things and moved to Denver. I wanted distance, not because I was running, but because I was ready for something new. I found a smaller home with big windows and mountain views. I painted the walls myself. I chose every piece of furniture slowly. For the first time in years, every decision was mine alone. Sometimes people ask if I regret not screaming, not exposing them publicly, not humiliating them. But revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be cruel. The strongest revenge is refusing to let someone rewrite your worth. They thought I would lose everything. They thought I would be too emotional to act strategically. They thought love made me weak. They were wrong. I didn't take everything from them. I simply took back what was always mine, my